It's Chelsea,
It's Nina.
and you're in the Critic's Kingdom.
Hey guys.
Welcome back to another week with your faves, Nina and
Chelsea. And we're actually going to be talking about Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension, which is their Disney Channel original movie based off of the extremely popular animated show, Phineas and Ferb.
popular to the extent that when did this come out? The show came out in 2007. This film came out in 2011. So to the point where in 2007, I was a solid teenager, on my way to college pretty soon.
I think we were 14 or 15.
Yeah. And definitely partook in the watching of Phineas and Ferb because I found it quite hilarious for various reasons that we will obviously get into.
Yeah. So I think with that, Nina, do you want to get into the recap?
Sure. I'll just jump on in. So I guess maybe to lay out the basics of it, the movie runs just a long episode of the show, and it sort of opens with, the running gags that are within the show itself. When we start, actually, we are at the end or towards the end of the movie, and the boys, Dr. Doofenshmirtz, who is I guess the great villain of the show, Perry the Platypus, who's also known as Agent P. He sort of lives a double life as both the pet to Phineas and Ferb and a secret, animal agent on a mission to stop Dr. Doofenshmirtz from everything that he ever attempts to do, mainly taking over the tri-state area. And, their sister Candace, their older sister Candace, who's always trying to bust them for the stuff that they do. They're all just trapped, and it seems about to face this huge hairy monster. And Phineas is let me take you guys back to the beginning. And we go back to the beginning and how the day started. Each episode usually covers a day of the boys' summer vacation, and they're inventors. So every day, Phineas is hey Ferb, what are we gonna do today? And they and their friends come up with a plan for something that they're gonna invent. Essentially, today they decided that they want to, I guess, play badminton with their bodies. So their plan is to build a platypus, which is a platypus catapult that will, shoot them across the different nets. It's a whole thing. But while they're doing that, Candace wakes up from a dream and she's her love interest, Jeremy, is going off to college soon. So she feels she has to start being more adult. And one of the ways that she's going to start being more adult is stop caring about what her brothers are doing and constantly trying to bust them for all of their wacky inventions that they come up with every day that her parents never seem to notice. So that's sort of Candace's storyline throughout the thing. And then meanwhile, we go over to Agent P, and he's in his lair, and he's essentially being told by his boss that he's gotten way too many close calls with his host family finding out that he is a secret agent. And if they find out that he's a secret agent, then he's going to have to leave them forever. So he has to but also that Dr. Doofenshmirtz is working on this other dimensionator that he has to go stop him from building because he's trying to access new dimensions. So Agent P goes out to stop that. Phineas and Ferb are building their platypus. They make it and they shoot themselves into the air. In the air, while Agent P is also flying to go stop Dr. Doofenshmirtz, the two things collide. The two shuttles sort of collide, and it sends Phineas and Ferb into Dr. Doofenshmirtz's lair, where he's building this other dimensionator. But Phineas and Ferb have no idea that this is a mad scientist. In fact, was it that they think he is because he's wearing a lab coat?
Did they think he was
a pharmacist?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's they're why would a pharmacist need to access another dimension? And he's people keep calling me that. That's not what I am. But yeah, so they get there and they're oh, we're inventors. We can help you fix this other dimensionator. And it's really the main problem is that you have the self-destruct button. So they go to fix it just in time. Perry the Platypus shows up, but he realizes Phineas and Ferb are there, and he's crap, I can't let them know that it's me. So he just acts as a platypus, acts as their pet. And there's a running gag in the show that, Dr. Doofenshmirtz cannot tell that it's the same platypus that is like his arch nemesis whenever Perry takes his hat off, his like detective hat off.
Mm-hmm.
So as the platypus, he's just like trying all of these ways to like keep Phineas and Ferb from doing it, like peeing on the couch and stuff. Doesn't work. Phineas and Ferb fix the other Dimensionator. It opens up, and Dr. Doofenshmirtz goes in to try to steal the couch from there. Phineas and Ferb follow him. Perry follows him. And they end up in this other dimension where, there are essentially duplicates of everybody that exists in our regular dimension, including Dr. Doofenshmirtz. But here, he's actually managed to take over the tri-state area and turned it into, a police state. And he's, turned Agent P into like Perry, like a cyborg, an evil cyborg who does his bidding and runs his armies. And so just everything is not the way that it's supposed to be. At first, Dr. Doofenshmirtz is really into this concept. He's like, whoa, like, here's the other me. And he's so cool. He's managed to like do all these things. And they're at first kind of best friends. And the evil Dr. Doofenshmirtz shows him that like Perry the platypus is Agent P, which also reveals this to Phineas and Ferb. And Phineas is very, very deeply hurt by this. He's like, Perry, what the hell? Like, why wouldn't you trust us to know this? And, the whole movie sort of, in terms of their relationship, revolves around this like big betrayal that Phineas feels. So anyway, like they try to go home from this obvious like shitty reality, but the remote that they use to open up the Dimensionator is broken. And the evil Dr. D at the same time comes up with, he's like, oh, like if I can get into another dimension, like I can go take over another tri-state area. So Phineas and Ferb like escape, and they go to try to like find themselves in this dimension to help them, fix the remote. And like Dr. D, evil Dr. D starts working on his like fixing this new Dimensionator so that he can go over and take the tri-state area. So Phineas and Ferb, they go and they just see that the world is not what they're expecting. Phineas and Ferb the new Phineas and Ferb don't know about summer, and they're not like inventors. They just conform because that's what you have to do in this world. You have to conform or you're, in major trouble. They end up going to find their friends in their dimension who are all like part of the resistance that they ultimately find out is led by Candace, their older sister, who's usually trying to bust them. In this new dimension, she's the leader of the resistance because the whole idea is that she tries to grow up too fast to protect her little brothers from having to grow up too fast. And they find out from Baljeet that like the way that the Dimensionator works is that it uses up a bunch of energy and it goes with the flow of the universe. So in order to do it, they just need like a crazy amount of energy. And they managed to figure out how to like work this remote and open up a new portal. But just as they open it up, they find out that like Perry has been like captured, and Phineas and Ferb make the decision to go and save him rather than go through the portal. But the opening of that portal allows Candace, who is in our dimension, in the regular dimension, who's like, she thinks that she's finally reached adulthood because she's like, whenever I try to bust my brothers, some mysterious force keeps my mother from seeing it. And when I came down to bust them myself, because I'm a grown-up now and like I can just bust them myself, that mysterious force clearly was at work and recognizes I'm an adult because they just disappeared. They weren't here anymore. So when she sees this portal open, she thinks it's like part of the mysterious force. So she goes into the portal, and now she's like in this new dimension, and like, she meets herself, part of the resistance, that whole thing. And is like, wow, like I'm super cool here, but also I'm like kind of, I guess kind of a hard ass and like not really about the fun of it all, which is going to make her reconsider her desire to grow up so quickly. And so they go to save Perry. It's a trap. They get caught, and it becomes like this elaborate scheme to sort of get away from them. They go on this like essentially like huge like roller coaster airport trolley-esque chase, and it seems like they're just about to escape, but like there's a chance that the door will close too quickly and not all of them will make it. So new Candace, rebel leader Candace, makes the decision to abandon Phineas Ferb and their sister and Barry to save herself and her brothers because that's all she cares about, really. So they get caught, and evil Doctor Doofenshmirtz is like, build me my other Dimensionator, and Phineas and Ferb are like, nah, bro, I'm not gonna do that. That doesn't make any sense. So, like, it's this whole back and forth, but then normal, less accomplished Doctor Doofenshmirtz realizes that he can fix it if he just removes the self-destruct button that he always puts in things. And he does that. He makes it work. Evil Dr. D is like, oh, y'all are all now redundant, sending you all to your doom. And he sends them down to where we started at the beginning of the film, where they're, up against this like hairy monster situation. But, they luck out because the new dimension Candace, she sort of, her brothers sort of convince her like, hey, those guys were cool. And like they were showing us that like we don't just have to conform, and we can do things, and we can save the day. Like we should go back and get them. So they all go back and they get them, and the remote works now, and they manage to like open up new dimensions. And then there's like a robot chase through all of the dimensions until they can finally get back to their own dimension. But when they get there, they see that the evil Dr. D has come through. He's taken over. He's starting to take over the tri-state area. He's sending all this robot stuff up into the air and all of that. And they're like, Perry, like, what are we going to do? But Perry has been found out by his host family. And so in his dimension, his boss is like, Perry, like, you got to leave them and you can't be with them anymore. And Phineas now understands like, oh, this is why you kept a secret from us. And Perry's like, yeah, I got to go. But he gives them his like collar, and at first they're really sad about it at home. They're like, why wouldn't he trust us to help him? And then they realize that this is actually like, it leads them to his lair. And in his lair, there's a secret message of like, if you have this, it means that the world is just kaput. And you guys are the only one I trust to fix it because I know you can do this. And it's like all of these inventions that they've done, over the course of this series. And it's just this thing of like Perry being like, this is why I love you so much. And like, I don't want to leave you guys, but I know that you guys are capable. So like, go out and save the world. And so they take all of their inventions and like their motley crew of friends, and they go and they just essentially just like mechanically defeat all of these robots and ultimately save the day. And evil Dr. D is still really trying to like win this situation. But then regular Dr. D is like, dude, you told me that the only reason that you are this upset with the world is because you lost your train as a child. In my dimension, I never lost that train. So I'm going to just give this to you. And like evil Dr. D is immediately, quelled and comforted, and now has no desire to ever take over the tri-state area. And it's just like, I'll just go back to my dimension, where, of course, he is immediately tried for, like, crimes against humanity. Kind of forgot about that part. So they save the day, but Agent P is going to have to leave them unless they consent to having their memories erased so that Agent P can keep his cover. And they do consent to that. We get Candace is finally like, I don't want to grow up too fast, and I'll continue to like half bust my brother. She goes to get her mom because she's like, all of this will stop if I go to get my mom because of the mysterious force. And she comes out, it's all been taken care of. Isabella and Phineas finally kiss, which is like totally sweet and adorable. And yeah, then their memories are erased, and in theory, that means that the TV show can continue in all of its exact layout of plot because they, again, no longer know that their platypus is in fact a secret agent. And that is Phineas and Ferb Across the Second Dimension.
Thank you, Nina. And with that, we're just going to take a quick break. Hey guys, so now we're going to get into the review Phineas and Ferb. So, I mean, I definitely think that this is like, first of all, such an all-star voice cast. Like, Nina and I were looking up like, oh, who plays who, even on the show, because it's the same people reprise their roles. But it is like a crazy voice cast. They've got Greg from Everybody Hates Chris, who voices Phineas.
that was just a very pleasant surprise. I did not know that.
Yeah, I did not.
And I'm glad to know that he will forever make those dollars off this show.
Yes, for real. And Ashley Tisdale does Candace. The guy that wrote Rocky Horror Picture Show voices their father, which is just wild.
Completely random.
I feel like the casting directors were like, who can't we get? Like,
let's build around that. But yeah, I mean, like I said, like I watched the TV show a bit. And I always enjoyed it when I watched it. I didn't watch it religiously, but I thought like it was a fun movie. Like it was a fun movie version of a show. I feel like they covered, and they covered all of the things that you expect to be covered in something that has to do with, science and invention. They go to different dimensions and there is like a basic level of character growth and like the secrets come out, but then they just, reset it all Men in Black style. So you can do it all again anytime you please.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, what we were talking about, some of the funniest jokes that I think also existed on the show, but the idea of like Dr. Doofenshmirtz only taking over the tri-state area, it's just a great one. It's just like one of those things where it's like, this is so specific. Like,
and it's like, it's
not you taking over the world. It's literally just like, no, I just want these 3 states. That's
it. And it's like, it's just big enough for it to be like, for a child, the tri-state area is, it's substantial. Like when you're watching weather reports and stuff, like that's what they're talking to you about, right? It's always the tri-state area. So it is like a big territory, like you do understand it as like a huge amount of space and like, oh wow, this means this guy is like serious. But at the same time, it's like not the world, like it's not too dark.
Right.
And they literally make him a schmuck. Like he's so just incapable of just everything. So I don't know. It's like I enjoy this type of villain in kids shows. Like where like the stakes are always actually super low, so it just makes the gags that much funnier. Like you can actually just laugh at it, but there can still be plot.
Yeah, he's a very, I think you said a harmless villain.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have any, there's not much real teeth to him. I feel like I might compare him to somebody like Mojo Jojo on Powerpuff Girls almost, where it's there, but he's like constantly a villain and like constantly trying to do something, but always going to get foiled. Whereas like,
it's like as opposed to him on Powerpuff Girls, who was like
legitimately scary,
terrifying. You're like, oh my god, like like that situation could actually get real sour real fast. But Mojo Jojo, you're just like, dude, your name's Mojo Jojo. Like the same with him, it's like your name is Doofenshmirtz. Come on, man, how serious can I take you?
Exactly, and he just also looks a little, dude, Dr. Doofenshmirtz with the eye patch from being born.
In the evil version.
The crux of this film is that the alternate universe Dr. Doofenshmirtz has this deep pit of sadness because he lost his choo-choo train, but everything else in his life was fine. So it just seems a little like dramatic.
Overdramatic for no reason.
The regular Dr. Doofenshmirtz, who literally is like, my parents did not show up to my birth, and it's like, I don't know if that's possible, but okay.
Yeah, that seems like what, like how did that physically work?
How did that happen? But okay, sure.
But he's just lived a life of pure sadness.
Truly, and
you actually feel bad for him.
He's like, you're mad over a train? It's truly just the most like, but it's also funny because it's like he's that mad over a train, but is actually more clever than our Dr. Doofenshmirtz. So yeah, he's able to go a lot further.
I could argue that there is a huge societal, just nod in that. How it's like the people who actually whose tragedy, when ranked against the other tragedy that others have suffered, like is significantly lower on the scale of what could happen to you, somehow are the angriest all the time and like the most capable, and probably because they actually still have resources, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like are the most capable of like lashing out and creating actively horrible, inhumane situations based on that anger over very minimal bad things that have happened to them.
Exactly.
Versus everybody who's like actually living, in poverty and just constant despair. They're just like, yeah, I'm just trying to make it through, and I got some faith.
Right. That's about it. That's all I have. It's some faith. We're going by with just the faith. That's it.
Exactly. I might use some choice words every now and then, but that's all it is. So there's that. So like the whole Doofenshmirtz joke is excellent. In this movie, I guess it is because in theory, I guess the time is technically 3 episodes long. Ferb gets 3 lines as opposed to his usual 1 line per episode, which is just incredible. Like conceptually, like that's probably outside of, and we can talk about this in a second, outside of just like how deep the references of this show go, and they exist in the movie too. That's probably my favorite running gag is that Ferb gets a single line every episode. And it's always like a very sort of logically not even necessary, but like just logically pointed line. Just like actually, just so you know, Phineas, that statement was a little bit off, and that's it.
You know who they remind me of, actually? And I don't know if maybe this was an inspiration for them or not, but Penn and Teller. Do you remember them, the magicians?
I don't think I do. That might be a reference that
they were like a
big
thing when we were growing up. They were literally like a set of magicians, and like they had shows, and like they were just kind of known. But anyways, Penn was the only one who would speak. Like Teller did not talk. It is the weirdest gag, but I feel like that must have inspired somebody, because they're like the most like well-known group that I can think of that did that. Literally, they did it from like the 70s until I don't think they don't perform anymore. But yeah, it's just one of those things that's so funny, because that was their whole thing, was like Penn was the only one that would speak. Teller would just do the magic, and it's like they remind me of them to a degree because of that.
But yeah, it's a good. I can't pinpoint any other like off the top of my head characters that do that, but I know that that's like a running, or like that's like when you have duos, that's a very common like child entertainment way to do a duo. Like you can even do like Bert and Ernie with that. Like one of them is very much one thing, and the other is just that opposite. Like just chilling. I don't know, maybe to encourage kids to be friends with different people or whatever. I don't know. But
yeah,
I do always appreciate that.
It's a very interesting trope. But it is funny, especially because Ferb also sings like the theme song and just like sings, but he won't talk, which is always just like a funny. I love when they do that in shows. It's always just great. He's got his
little guitar and he does his music thing. I also appreciate that it's like I really like that it's a show where it's a blended family, but it's never sort of referenced by the children. You know what I mean? Like that's his brother. Like me and my brother Ferb. It's like, yeah, that's just what it is. Like I don't know when they became a family, but it's just not and I assume that it has to be reasonably recently, because for Ferb to still have that accent, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah, he still has a pretty
like if he's
British
been in
accent.
America since he was 2, that would not be the case.
Right. Yeah, no, he has a pretty thick British accent when he does decide to speak.
And even Candace does that too. She's like busting my brothers. There's no like, oh, like blood versus not. It's like, no, we're one family, and just because like we came together in a not purely biological way,
right.
Like it doesn't make us any less of a family. Like that's still my brother. So I've always appreciated that about that show too, and that shows up in the movie, I suppose.
I also will say, when they go to the second dimension, one of the things that I enjoyed was that the other Phineas and Ferb were playing conformity, I think.
Yeah.
And then when our Phineas and Ferb at their house, they're like, oh my god, we didn't, because they're like, we're being replaced, basically. And it was just so funny, because it's like that's the whole thing with the I think you called it the police state that Dr. Doofenshmirtz in the second dimension has, is like everybody wears the same things, everybody does the same things, all the men work at the factory for him, and all the kids wear the same overalls, or everybody wears the same overalls, and he's the only thing on TV. Like it's very much like an imagined like villain police state, and everybody's like monitored by these robots that like have like a pretty boy on them, like
on the other side, who's keep trying to offer people muffins. What's these robot muffins?
God. It's very interesting.
Stop oppressing me.
It's very interesting, but just the idea of like, conforming or not conforming, and how this is like a forced, I think you would also argue like anytime somebody has to conform, it's kind of forced, but sometimes it would be useful. Like during COVID-19, if Americans conformed more, we probably would not be in the situation we're in now. But everything in moderation. You also shouldn't take conformity to an extreme either.
Yeah. I mean, but it does also live in that space of I know exactly why we do it, like why the villain of like an imagined horrible state from the Hollywood and therefore American perspective is always, we can say police state, but what we're really talking about is communism. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's always like, oh my God, like you have to conform to, but it's like, it really does eclipse this notion that like, like, first of all, conforming is as sort of natural a process as being an individual. Arguably, it is more natural of a process than being an individual. You know what I mean? Like, think about you at 12 when you were like coming into adulthood biologically. Like, what did you want? You wanted to find your place in the pack.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it would be nice if it was at the alpha of the pack, but like at the end of the day, you just need to have a role, right? And like you did things to put yourself in that role, and you sort of had to be trained out of that as you got older, to like, embrace yourself and like don't worry about what other people think and all of that. Like that was rhetoric that you had to be taught. So I don't know. I'm not saying like, for all of my expat tendencies, like I know that I am a product of America and a very American person. But and I do definitely like my individuality for sure. But at the same time, like intellectually, I feel like I really do. I'm always just like we probably should stop villainizing this so heavily because it's actually we have kind of shown that capitalism and deeply individualistic tendencies don't do the world much good
at all.
And fundamentally don't do us much good. Right. So we should probably just like stop. Like this is probably one of those things that we should stop like riding so hard on. Like we could just quietly stop, pushing this particular agenda as far as we do. But that's just, an intellectual thought experiment that we could try at some point.
No, but you're right, because it does really sink into people, and that's why a lot of Americans have such a negative idea of any other way of thinking or any other way of doing the markets, because every time it's portrayed in media, it's like a negative. It's always like, well, then you'll end up a socialist. And it's and then it's like if your only association with like socialism is like, let's say if you saw this police state, if they were saying that Dr. Doofenshmirtz in the alternative universe was a socialist, that's what like that just stays, because the problem is there's no alternative programming to counteract that here.
Exactly.
So you're literally just like,
sorry,
that's all I like. That's socialism is us living in a police state with a boyish young man and being a robot and asking me for my papers.
Boyish young man. Asking for, even though like, and this is always like my favorite part of it. Like everybody on their keto diets and all of this joint. It's like you understand that hunter gatherers were socialists, right? Like you understand that that's what that society is. Like. That is what socialist society is. Like even early civilization, like when we first started planting things, socialist. Like it's not like the other stuff developed later. So you want to talk about going back to like what's natural? I'm just saying there are things to consider reevaluating.
There's a lot of things to reconsider. I mean, if we were going to go back to things.
That is true. That is true. And I do like, I've said this many a time to you, Chelsea. I don't know how many times I've said it on this podcast, but I really do like indoor plumbing. And I enjoy my sedentary lifestyle. So I guess if that comes with demonizing police states, then that's just what I gotta do, right? I just gotta
You get used to your
accept
creature comfort
the
too, I will say.
reality.
Because then you go to other places and you're like, oh, why isn't my room as big? Like, why? Like, that was my thing.
I can't get food. I can't get food at 2
Right.
a.m. There isn't somebody in a kitchen making it just in case I
No,
want
that
it.
was literally my thing.
That seems
when
strange.
I lived overseas in like Spain. It's like, unless you like, things are just smaller, but that's because like that's how it is, you know. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's how it is in honestly a lot of places. Like, it's just like but here we're maximalists, so it's like everything is bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So
especially in the coastal state.
yeah, and they also give you
in
so
New
much
York,
food. Like it's just, there's a lot of things that are very different here that I don't think people realize unless you go somewhere else, and then you're just like, oh.
Yeah, you're like, oh, this is not how you're supposed to live. This is wrong. This is fundamentally wrong. But like another thing that I kind of enjoyed sort of watching in this movie was, Phineas's reaction to Perry is obviously like a huge, like I think there are two big relationship things in this. And the first is, sort of Phineas and Perry and like this betrayal that Phineas feels versus Perry's like attempt to protect them from like losing him, or to protect himself from like losing them. And then on the other side, like in that same vein of protection, like this sort of breakdown of like Candace and her sort of fundamental motivations. Because like if Dr. Doofenshmirtz is like the big villain of the show for like for Perry, then like Candace plays like the the like harmless villain for her brothers. You know what I mean? Like she's always like, I'm gonna bust you, I'm gonna get you in trouble with Bob, and it literally never works ever. So like she's not really a threat to them, and they know that. But like, they're just like, oh, all right, Candace, like kind of do your thing. But like that sort of breaking down of her character and showing it in this new dimension is like, oh, like she's actually only out here to look out. Like she's actually only looking out for you. Like, yes, she would like to be vindicated for once of just like, yo, do you see what they're doing, Mom? Like, this is actually not okay. It would be nice for you to recognize that and pay attention to your children. But it comes from this place of like fundamentally like wanting to protect them from themselves. Like, you're out here doing things that are dangerous potentially, and I want you to not get hurt. So I think that you should probably stop doing that. But yeah, all just like they do that chain of the ways in which we can try to protect each other and how they can fall short, because sometimes to protect means to not trust. And that's just like, it's a cute, like, it's not cute, but it's a thing that is complicated for the entirety of your life. And it's, but it's getting children to sort of get into that mindset of understanding those levels the earlier you can, I think probably makes her just better, more empathetic people across the board.
No, I completely agree.
And then I guess the other, like the fun, like I said, just the references, they continue. My personal favorite situation that they did in this was existentialist trading cards. They have all these small children talking about like Kierkegaard and just like trading. It was like Plato, like trading these like it's baseball cards, but they're philosophers. Like, well, that's just, no child knows who Kierkegaard is. You know what I mean? Like no 6-year-old watching this show was like, oh snap. Or like there's a part where like there's a bunch of robot parts and somebody's like, oh, like it looks like a Georgia O'Keeffe painting. Like that is so far above the heads of children. But it's like, I mean, there are kids who are gonna like, I think for certain things I was one of those kids who would like actually look that up. Like I distinctly remember once in history class in like junior year of high school, my teacher being like, "Oh, like do you guys know do you guys know about like the Union label? Like there was a song." And I was like, "Wait." And I immediately started singing the song because there's a Boy Meets World episode where like they sing that song because Corey's trying to like organize his classmates against the principal. So he sings that song. And I was like, I remember like being 16 to be like, "Oh my God." Like that is not like that's crazy that that reference was built into like this small TV show. Well, not small TV show, it's kind of a big deal, but into this half an hour TV show that I watched when I was 10. So I appreciate that they do this. They do it so well in Phineas and Ferb. Like one of my favorite episodes is like one where they incorporate Howl, and it's like Allen Ginsberg was literally on trial for like censorship issues, and it's like you decided to put that into literal children's programming. Like I just appreciate how deep and how unafraid their references go.
No, I completely get that. I feel like that's what makes kids TV though, like really good when they can put in that kind of stuff and you're just like, oh, okay. And you like walk around with this knowledge that you don't really know you have.
Yeah.
I feel like it's always.
And then you can call on later. Like it shows up and you're like, oh, snap.
Exactly. Well, that's like the only reason I know we went to the moon in 1969 is because of Even Stevens. There's a whole song about it.
And the trip wasn't all that easy, Chelsea.
Not
it wasn't all
1968 or the year after.
That is true. That episode is great.
I need to rewatch.
That episode was incredible.
I haven't watched Even Stevens in years. But yeah, I do like when children's TV does that kind of thing because it is like I think it's kind of nice not to dumb things down for kids because they understand a lot more than you think. And you know, why not just get those influences in there early? Let's mention a little Nietzsche.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think that, you know, and it's why like I've always sort of been really interested in children's entertainment because like, you know, I come from an educational background where I've been sort of, you know, I've worked hard, but I've been, you know, very lucky with the opportunities that have resulted from, you know, the resources or natural talents that I may have had. And I've seen sort of the huge impact of education firsthand and in all of the ways that it is, like, we know it's fundamental, but like it's really, really, really fundamental. And I've always been interested in children's programming because I think that it is the part of entertainment that sort of marries my two passions, which are education, or it should be a realm where those two things are coming together, education and like art. You know what I mean? Like this particular art form of media. And like, I don't know, like I'm not going to come at all children's programming of recent years or most children's programming of recent years, or make the argument that like everything a child watches should be educational, because I do understand the idea of like, oh, but they also just need to like play. But I appreciate when I see really well done versions of play that still manage to impart actual like cultural and just like necessary life skills into that play. Like Phineas and Ferb I think like the way that it's set up is so brilliant. Like it's literally just like these kids who are like, yo, we only have like 100 days of summer. Like, and then school is gonna come and it's gonna mess us up. So like we gotta make the most of every single day of summer. But the way that these kids choose to make the most of every single day of summer is by it's playing, but they're playing with innovation, with creativity, with literally inventing new things, trying out new ideas. And that ends up being, they are learning so much every single day, you know, and they're trying out new skills every single day, as opposed to it all just being, I don't know, like, you know, like fart jokes and like, you know, like, you know, like kid banter and stuff like that. Like it's actually attempting to like push the minds of these kids a little bit more, but not in a way that's inaccessible. It's like pushing them in a way that they feel they can do. You know, it's like that kid that the kids that watch Phineas and Ferb, like then they're like, oh, like I'm gonna go build a city out of my blocks. You know, and they might do another one the next day, but it's gonna be a little bit different. They're gonna get a little bit better at like working those blocks out. You know what I mean? And I appreciate that lens on entertainment and play, but play that is fundamentally driven by like encouraging thought.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. And I also think it's always fun when people focus on like children as inventors rather than like the more, I feel like, not stereotypical, but the more typical routes that I feel like people tend to go in for children, which is either that you're super artsy or you're into science. It's like one of those two, as we know from every single DCOM, you got to pick one. Stick to the status quo.
Or you're athletic. You know what I mean? Like if you're super sciencey, right. Like you're not inventing things. Yeah, like you're not doing anything physical. It's like, but that's not true. That's actually fundamentally
So I always
false.
think inventing is fun because it's like you're literally making something out of nothing, and all kids like to do is use their imagination. So it's like it's also weird how I feel like we don't really foster that a lot, but kids should be like the ideal people to like invent things because like they have no limits, you know. Like nobody has yet told them you can't or can do something by that age, like by 9 or 10, or like not enough that it like has finally broken through, and you just get broken down by the time you're like 17, but when you're younger than that, you're still just seeing everything with fresh eyes. So it's just like, I don't know, I feel like there needs to be more like baby inventor kits or something.
Yeah. And I mean, like they certainly exist, but they're not like. And I don't know for what reason. Like they just haven't been. I don't know. Maybe it also has to do with like the advent of technology and a digital era where things are just becoming easier and easier. So ironically enough, like while in order to continue that line, you definitely need people who are capable of like inventing and creatively thinking. That is being like that is happening on like a digital level. It's, you know, oh, like, yeah, get your own camera and do a YouTube show, learn how to program, learn how to like, but those things are very, it's not, there's no one saying like, come up with something completely different from an iPhone. You know what I mean? Like it's living in the space of smart technology as opposed to attempting to create something that is entire. But I guess there's also the argument to be made that, you know, like all invention always piggybacks off of something else. Like if scientists weren't fascinated with light, like we maybe wouldn't have gotten electricity. You know what I mean? Like, and they were fascinated with light from candles and from coal and from oil, like we invented fire, you know, like you can argue that is one trajectory if you really want to. So I don't know, it's up in the air, but it definitely does. Oh, and that in that vein, I also do just want to mention that at the end of this movie, they have like they do like a photo montage.
Oh yeah, they do.
Of like Perry like flipping through all of his photos of like, you know, Phineas and Ferb in the other dimension. And I think I literally said to Chelsea, I was like, that is so Gen Z. It's not even funny because when did these children have time to take photos? Like, when did they have time to run around taking photos while they were like actively fighting, you know, robots, literal like evil robots?
Exactly.
And going through dimensions. Like what? Who had the camera? Like I didn't even see a phone pop out at any time. Like, well, how did they do it? But I appreciate that was in there regardless.
Yeah. So I guess with that, would you show this one to your kids?
I think I would definitely show Phineas and Ferb the TV show to my kids, and then this would be just a natural progression of that. Yeah, I mean, like I will also say, like one of my larger issues with Phineas and Ferb, because they like have Isabella, but it is a very male centric show in terms of like just the character layout. And like, you know, I wish that were a bit more even. You know, like it could have even been like Phineas
Mm-hmm.
and Ferb, you know? That could have happened. But yeah, I think it's I like it like for all the reasons that we said, like I think it's good to like get kids imagining and dreaming and, you know, willing to take those dreams and like physically put their hands to them. I think that that's like something that the world always needs more of. I think that that is like one of the things of the American sort of spirit and ideology that I do fundamentally support in a very real way. You know, like America loves to is is sort of painted as a land of innovation and a land of inventors, a land of like risk takers, and I think that that is a it's something that I would like to see fostered in the wee ones. Um, so yeah, like I would definitely. I think my kids will probably watch this and they'll probably enjoy it. For all of the above reasons.
I agree.
And you, Chelsea?
I think this is a fun one, like we were saying, and I do think it is kind of a natural progression from the show, so you can't really not watch it. If that makes sense. But yeah, you know, I still feel like it's a very simple plot. It's a very, you know, typical type of plot, but it's still fun, and I think kids would enjoy it. And it is always good to just like kind of reinforce that like you can do anything, you can invent anything, you can be anything. And I feel like this does that very well, and the show does it even better. So yeah, I would definitely say that they could watch it. I don't know if it would be on like my like must watch list, but it would, you know, we'd eventually get around to it.
Yeah, I feel like I would definitely do like a throw, like, you know, like my kids like have to watch like The Proud Family and like That's So Raven. Like there's no sort of choice with that. Like it's just gonna be something that they are forced to watch. But yeah, I don't know, but I'll probably put this in like the like regular show Adventure Time batch. You know, like this will live in that like area. You know, maybe when you're like 9, we'll start watching this together. Yeah. Or I'll be like, hey, have you guys watched Phineas and Ferb yet? Oh no, come, let me show you. Come. But yeah, so it's cool. It was a fun film to watch. You know, it's animated and so it's a little kooky and you know there are fun moments in it. There are clever moments in it, and I don't know. I think that it's you know there aren't many animated shows that are made for children that are also entertaining for adults, and this falls into that category. So I appreciate it for that. And the movie, you know, it's not it's not an Oscar winner, but it's you know it doesn't disappoint and it holds up on what the show is.
No, I agree. I think you know it's part of it, so therefore they kind of have to watch it. And it is fun. It's not like Good Luck, Charlie. So, which we never need to speak about again.
Why you don't bring it up, man? No, I thought we both agreed to forget about that.
I'm just saying there are examples of where it's not being watched, even though it's part of a show that was decent.
This is true.
So yes,
this is true.
But yeah, guys, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of The Critics Kingdom. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify and SoundCloud so you can stay up to date, as well as interacting and letting us know what you guys think on social media. You can find us on Twitter at Critics Kingdom and on Instagram at The Critics Kingdom. We're excited to talk to you again next week.